Welcome to our RDF Church podcast. This is our Midweek Connection where we go deeper into the sermon that we heard this past Sunday. We really hope that this podcast and this week's discussion encourages you as you grow deeper into your relationship with God and as you get to know our church family closer and closer. We really hope you enjoy. All right, well, welcome back, everyone, to our Midweek Connection podcast. Today, we are joined by our very own Brittany Harms.
Hi.
As some of you guys heard, she's going to be going to Chiang Mai through Partners.
Yep.
And they were just here this past Sunday, and that was an incredible message that Steve brought. It was amazing.
Yep.
Really hit me, and I think that it's really cool to see that our church responds to that in the way of saying, you know what, we're not just a church that stands by and says, okay, all this stuff that's happening in the world, we're just going to let it come by. But when we hear these things, we act, we feel that deeply. And the motto of that of Sunday was to love is to act, and I felt like in that we raised for them. They raised a lot of money through us, which is incredible. But today, having Brittany here, I think it would be really cool to ask you, how did you come to the realization that God was calling you to the mission field, and then how did you come to Partners?
Yeah. Well, it's a story that takes a couple years. So when I was a sophomore in college back in 2016, I spent my spring semester of that year studying abroad in Spain. I loved it, everything about it. I loved being immersed in a new culture. I lived with a host family, was learning Spanish, and I was just floored about it. When I got home that May, I kind of felt like a huge dream of mine was checked off, and I was like, well, God, what do you want me to do next? And at that point, I knew, okay, well, I was halfway done with college. I still had 2 more years, but I felt extremely called to the mission field. I felt through prayer and through guidance and talking to some of my mentors, I was like, I think the mission field is it. I think this is what I want to do. I don't know. And at that point, I knew, okay, well, I can't just I didn't want to just drop out of college and go and pursue that yet. So I was asking God, what can I do for the next 2 years? Like, what's the first step that I can take in order to know that this is part of my future and just to kind of fulfill this part of my calling? And I got the opportunity to go to Guatemala twice, once per every spring break the rest of my college career. So the next 2 years, I went back to Guatemala working with an organization called Students International, which works with a lot of locals down in Guatemala alongside Americans and people from other countries as well. And it was amazing because I got to interact with not only just the people of Guatemala and use my Spanish, but I met with a lot of missionaries. Talked with them, full-time missionaries from the U.S. saying, hey, how did you get involved with this? What's it like to just leave everything and just move to another country? What are the challenges involved, especially with doing something that can cause a lot of burnout, like ministry and cross-cultural ministry especially. So I got a lot of feedback and got a lot of advice from those missionaries on those trips. It was extremely a time of a time of growth and a time of kind of fleshing out more of that calling that I felt put on my heart. So I graduated college about a year ago in April 2018. And at that time I knew, so I studied communications and Spanish, but I wanted to pursue journalism in some capacity because I wanted, I felt like, God, okay, you've given us this truth. I want to speak the truth into the world, and I want to use stories to kind of tell that truth. So I felt really called into journalism, but spent the entire summer trying to find a job, and it kept not working out. All my plans just fell through, applying to 50 jobs over the course of a month, and nothing, not even hearing back from some of them. And I started to get really discouraged. So I had moved back in with my parents here in Yorba Linda, and I took a job at a restaurant, just kind of okay, well, I have to make money, I have to do something, and I'm feeling really, really discouraged, really depressed, feeling comparing myself to my peers and feeling like, God, what do you want with my life? And I had kind of at this point the missions thing was kind of on the back burner. I thought, I'll do that later. But like, first I want a career. That was just something that I just was like, I want a career. And then my mom had asked Greg Prickett, our missions pastor, well, they're in the same Sunday school class, and my mom had asked for a prayer request about me and my job search and just how discouraged and depressed I was getting. So Greg comes up to my mom after, or she asked for prayer about, oh, can you pray for my daughter? She's having a hard time. And then Greg's like, hey, what did she study? And my mom tells him about my story and kind of what I studied in college. And he's like, I might have something in this company or this organization called Partners. Would she be interested? And one thing led to another. I met with Greg in September, and we kind of talked about what it would look like if an opportunity were to open up in Partners, but it wasn't for sure yet. So at that point, I was like, okay, cool. Partners might be a thing. Maybe I am called into the mission field, but for now, I'm just going to do my thing, work at this restaurant, and just kind of do life. So I was doing that. At the same time, I felt like, well, I do want to move abroad. So I went and pursued a teaching English as a foreign language certificate, which takes a couple months to complete. So I started doing that and thinking, if Partners falls through, I'll still move abroad and teach English in some other country. Right. Well, around November, December, when I was almost done with my certificate, Greg comes to me and says, it's a go. Here's an application. Fill it out, send it in. Wow. We're going to get you working at Partners. And I was like, cool, this is great. Well, also, I have been working on, just a life update. I've been working on this teaching English degree. And he's like, oh, great, that's perfect. There's an English school involved.
Amazing.
So that was like, I didn't even know about that. So now my role will be, I leave in August to go and teach English part-time and then also work on the communications team part-time. So it'll be like a twofold thing. And just seeing like God's providence through year after year, and I didn't know what it was going to look like, and it was so often so uncertain and vague, and just kind of like, even the times when I was trying to run for it and pursue a different path, God kept gently redirecting me back into what would be my calling, which is to go out to work with Partners in the mission field. So
wow, that's incredible. It's funny how we can, think that our life is going one way that isn't something that you want it to be going to, or, you feel discouraged about, there's no jobs, there's nothing, what are we doing? And then God just says, oh, you think that there isn't? Boom, here's something that you're just like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. And it checks like so many boxes. It was like what I wanted for myself. And I remember reading my journal back recently and seeing that, I had written like, okay, if journalism and living in Phoenix where my college was and, doing my original plan, if that was the best thing for me, then it would have happened because God always has my best interest in mind. And the reason that this hasn't worked out and I'm so discouraged is because God is redirecting me to something better. And that has absolutely been true now that, hindsight 2020, I see that and I see where God was leading me in that. Yeah.
So. That's incredible. I think what's really cool to see is, it's like, it truly is for Rose Drive. It's one of our own. I know that we produce a lot of missionaries, right? Yeah. But it's really cool to see someone that is, like me, or like any other young adult here,
right?
Or someone that has been going to Rose Drive for your whole life, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that even in this context, in your Belinda, Placentia area, that God is still saying, hey, I'm going to use you for somewhere else,
Yep.
And that this church is going to develop you into going out, which is really amazing. I'm interested to know what is something that you're very excited about to be in Chiang Mai, and then something that you might, that you're like, I'm not too sure.
Right, sure. I could list a lot of things. I think what I'm most excited for is just going back to outside of my cultural comfort zone. I remember when I was living briefly in Spain, I felt like, I'm kind of always, I don't know if on edge is the right word to say for it, but I was always feeling like more aware. I had a heightened level of awareness of how I am perceived by the world and how I go and interact with people, because what an American might, think, I'm being friendly by, making like firm eye contact and a strong handshake, that might come across as aggressive in another culture. So I am eager to be humbled by, going into a culture that I know. I've done some research, but how much can you really know until you go and live there? And so I'm going to get really, I think it'll be it's a welcome challenge in my life to be able to go to Chiang Mai and just be a learner 100% of the time and constantly kind of have this like, sometimes it might feel like a burden, but I think it's really a joy of getting to learn and integrate into a new culture. I'm very excited about that. The thing I'm most nervous about, I would say, or just kind of like on edge, I think I do worry about the language barrier. I learned Spanish, but that's very similar, especially in Southern California. We have a lot of opportunities to learn it here. So learning the language, I know that is going to be a big leap of faith for me to have to learn such a challenging language. It's a tonal language, which is not something I have any experience with, but all of that will deepen my faith because I'm going to be completely relying on God to help me to communicate well with my students, with these people, even though I have a pretty severe language barrier. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's it's really encouraging for me to hear that. It's when I talk to Greg Prickett and as I talk to other missionaries, that learning the culture and learning the language is one of the key parts to go over in a new context for you, in a new culture, in a new place. To be a missionary there is to actually learn, learn language, learn the culture. I think that's so encouraging. I think that speaks into a lot of this idea of, Americans going into foreign lands and saying our way is the best way.
Right.
And that completely dispels that, because our way isn't the best way.
Yep.
Each culture God uses specifically for them.
Right. Right.
And I think that's so encouraging. And I'm sure, I think you'll, I feel like when you come back on your first sabbatical or and I'm excited to hear you talk that way and excited to hear where you are at in learning the language and hearing you speak in that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, when you do a cross-cultural experience, especially longer term, I can only speak to what I've experienced already. And I know that the Brittany 1 year from now returning to come back home for a little while, it's going to be a different person, So I can't speak to the ways that God will change my heart and that the people that I meet will change my heart. And, the Spirit will do things that are a mystery to me now. And I think, so yeah, I'm excited to see the growth and the change that happens in my heart.
Well, that is awesome. That is awesome. Well, how can we be supporting you? I know that we were able to... Greg was able to announce that, they'll be supporting you, our, what is it? What do you call it?
It's like I have a monthly budget.
Yeah, you have a monthly budget. Yeah,
through provided. The Faith Promise budget. Right. Yeah.
So, but as Greg also said that you're still, raising money for that.
Absolutely.
How is there any way we can... we can do that electronically or mail you something? Or
sure. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So there's a website URL, and maybe we can put it in the show notes or but so you can donate via online. There's a link to Partners website, or at least a section of it where you support the missionaries. So I'm going, the first 2 years are just volunteering. I'm going for certain 1 year and then hopefully a second year after that. And that's just going to be like the money that I raise will be what I live off of.
Got it.
Now, Thailand's pretty affordable. I'm expecting to need about $1,500 a month to cover all of my expenses, rent, everything. Yeah. And so you can go and donate a one-time donation or sign up to become a monthly donor, which is huge because that's, I have to have a certain amount. I have to have 3 months worth of my budget as well as the cost of the plane ticket fundraise before I leave in August. Got it. So a one-time donation is huge, but also monthly, that'll, be sustaining me for the next year, hopefully, too. So, the donation would be huge. And then, of course, prayer support. It's, the number one thing. Until I had a, kind of moment where my heart shifted from an orientation of, I can do this. I just got to ask the right people. I just got to make the connections to, it's all going to be God who's going to make this happen for me and make, clear the way for me to go. Yeah. That's when I realized, okay, this will happen because it's God. So I do need prayer against spiritual warfare and different things as well.
Right.
So
That's awesome. So that URL is it like a really complicated URL that you
it's
can...
really easy. So you'll click on it. It's cool. There's like my picture and a little story, or my story essentially, really condensed because they only allowed me 2,000 characters, which I was disappointed about. I'm pretty wordy, but I condensed it down to like a really general, like what I'm going to be doing. Yeah. And then at the bottom is just like donate link. You just click through. It's just like, buying something on Amazon. So pretty easy.
Is the URL? Can you say the URL right now?
I don't have it memorized.
Okay.
It's like funraise.partners, but FUN raise.
Got it.
.partners.com/ a bunch of numbers.
Okay,
So it's a little complex.
So we'll have it in the show notes and everything.
And for those of you listening that are from Rose Drive, I do have little business cards that have like my contact information as well as like a donation link on there. So, come up to me.
Go find you.
Yes. Yeah. Go find me, and I'll give you a business card as well.
Yeah. If you don't know what Brittany looks like, then watch the YouTube.
I'll be putting it out on social media. Yeah.
Or look up.
In
RDF Central. What does Brittany look like? Okay, Brittany Harms.
Yeah, and then find that blonde girl.
Yeah.
So.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for being with us here, and I'm really encouraged to hear your story, and really encouraged to continue to partner with you in prayer to really see what God is going to do through you.
Yeah.
It's really awesome, and it's very humbling to see God using you in such an incredible capacity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And thank to you for joining us for this midweek podcast. We will see you next time.
All right.